How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling. We got Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly here, and today's the day we're going to try to catch up on a lot of emails and as well as take phone calls. We don't have guests today, and I don't think we'll have a full-time guest tomorrow. We may have a short-term guest tomorrow, but the next 2 days we'll do that. We got guests Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We, of course, had a pay-per-view last night, WWF Backlash. We got Brian Alvarez here, and Brian, what were your thoughts? I guess we could start on the pay-per-view. What do you think?
Well, I wasn't really disappointed with the pay-per-view because I pretty much had no expectations going in, except that I really didn't want to see the main event too much, and they did nothing during that match to change my opinion of that bout. And I think, with the exception of, like, Benoit and Angle, because it was 30 minutes, and Shane and Show, because they had, like, the scary bump, you know, it was pretty much like a Raw show. I mean, most of the matches were Raw matches. Main event even was like a Raw main event. You know, they went a little bit longer than they went on a Raw show, but, I mean, as far as, like, a special pay-per-view or, like, you know, something that you'd want to pay $29.95 for, I really don't think they delivered.
I thought that it was a solid show. I didn't think anything was really bad on the show, and I didn't think anything was really good on the show. I mean, really good. There were things that were good.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of thoughts on the show when it was over. The main event went way too long. I mean, those guys, I guess probably because we had, last week seemed to me like it was 70s week. You know, I did an obituary on a guy who wrestled in the 60s and the 70s who did this long match style. So I kind of had my mentality there. Then we had so many guys from the 70s on the show. And then I watched this pay-per-view, and I felt like I was watching 70s wrestling with 90s moves. With the long matches and everything. I mean, that main event was so old style, which is not a knock on it, but it was just so long. And then they had the 30-minute match, which was also very long. Everything was by the book. The Benoit Angle match I thought was much better on television than it appeared to be live. And it reminded me, you know, I was live at the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels Iron Man match in Los Angeles. And one of the things that nobody remembers about that match, and nor would they because they weren't there live, was how that match did not get over live. I would say probably 25% of the audience was gone from the building in this world title match where the main event at WrestleMania by about 50 minutes into the match, and almost nobody was left. I would say it's probably 25-30% of the people were left for Shawn doing the post-match celebration. Now on TV, nobody knew that, and on TV it was a pretty darn good match. In fact, I was stunned when I went home and watched that match on TV. It's one of the reasons why I will never go to a WrestleMania live because literally it was like a totally different show on TV. It was so much better on TV. Live, I mean, it was just so, you know, the people just, you know, they were so mad whenever there would be a near fall and the guys would kick out because, you know, when that thing was going on. Now, of course, they'll never do that, go 60 minutes without a fall. So this time they did a lot of falls. I thought Heyman and Ross did a good job of announcing and telling the strategy of why these guys are tapping so much quicker. But the people live, the moves weren't over except for the ankle lock and the crossface. And submission wrestling without the near falls, it's just very tough to do. And unlike with Rock and Triple H,
I think they did a good job on that one SmackDown when Angle went out there and he used a whole bunch of different submissions to make guys tap out. But the problem was it was just like one show. You know, they had to have done that for months and months with guys tapping out to everything in order for this to get over. And I think the other problem, in fact, we talked about this before the match even began, is they didn't do pinfalls, so it really took away a lot of the near falls they could have done. You know, they could have done, you know, if they would have done like just a 30-minute Iron Man match or something like that and did a bunch of submissions, I think it would have gone over a lot better than, I mean, there was a million things they could have done that, you know, they couldn't do in a submission-only match. Plus, if it's submission-only, they had to work on all these submissions that really weren't over, so I think it hurt the match.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the problems is that when you have a style of wrestling where everyone pretty much has one or sometimes two finishing moves, then when you're doing a match that requires multiple finishing moves, people don't pop for them. You know, like, I mean, who in the WWF has won with an armbar lately? You know, or a knee, that knee lock. I mean, they've never been used as finishers. No one knew what they were. And it made it tough. And, you know, the crowd live, that was, you know, a lot of reports live thought that was the worst match. Now, on TV, you know, a lot of people, in fact, the majority of the response we got was that was the best match on the show. You know, Shane and Big Show, I don't know what to say about it. Regal and Jericho, I mean, it was that Vancouver match from last year, and that match stunk last year, and it was better this year, but that that stipulation. I mean, everyone could see where it was going. It was just so silly, and I thought that the silliness of that, I think that they tried to do a contrast where they would do a really silly match and then a real serious match, which was Benoit and Angle right after. And what happened is that nobody could take the serious match seriously after seeing the clown show, and I think that hurt as well. But overall, I mean, the show was all right. I didn't think, it could have been a whole lot worse. There was no bad wrestling on the show. I mean, the opener was fine. Rhino and Raven was certainly the one match that pretty much everybody thought was much better than they expected.
I thought that was a really good match. I was shocked because usually I hate those WWF hardcore matches. They just bore me. It's like, hit this guy with something, hit this guy with something. And this match was, by the time it was over, I thought that was probably the best hardcore match I've seen in the WWF in like a year.
Yeah, that was real good. Jericho and Regal was a big disappointment because of the way it was booked. Angle and Benoit was a disappointment. Good, I mean, technically a very good match, but, certainly when you have the idea of that you're going to see these two guys go 30 minutes. I mean, one of the things is like, and I could be wrong about this, but I think they didn't hit a suplex till 26:40 into the match because, they were, you know what I mean? And that's the kind of stuff that on their TV matches, I mean, the highlight is those guys, Benoit and Angle doing the suplexes back and forth. I mean, Benoit did the chops, but without the pinfall, no diving headbutt, all of the pinfall stuff didn't matter. It really took a lot away from the game. Even, so that one, kind of, whatever, the three-way, for the European title, it was okay.
It was good, just short.
It was good. It was good. Yeah, it was good. 3 good workers. I guess a lot of people were disappointed that the WCW guy to save Shane McMahon turned out to be Test. Sure. What's funny is there's 2 things. It's like everyone that we talk to is worried about basically 2 things in wrestling right now. Okay, number 1 is that the WWF will not elevate new guys, and the top guys will keep their positions and it will turn into WCW. And yet that's exactly what it seems to be happening. And the other one is that the WWF, when they start this WCW, they're going to send some guy over there who's a mid-card WWF guy, and he's going to end up being the biggest star in WCW, so therefore no one will take WCW seriously. And even though everyone knows that there's an inherent problem there are people in the WWF higher up who say, don't worry, we know we're not going to send Billy Gunn there or Test there and have them beat everyone. We know we can't do it. We know what that will mean. We know that will kill the whole concept if we do this. Yet I still am scared that it's still gonna. It's like every time they talk about
that's the way that they're leading with the storylines.
Yeah, I'm still scared.
Why does Test keep helping Shane McMahon if he's not going to WCW?
Well, I don't mind. Hey, I don't mind Test going to WCW, and I don't mind him being a key player there. He just, but he can't be. If he's portrayed as so superior to all the WCW guys, that's going to be bad. By the way, they gave a list on the Jim Ross report. So if you want to check on the WF website, they have the list of the 24 guys, and they didn't bring it down here. But there were no surprises on the list. But for those who wanted to know who Sam Loman is, it was actually Brian who emailed me. His name is Sam Roman, and it's Kid Romeo. So that's the guy who nobody knew. Jason Boyles is Jason Broyles. He got that name wrong, but that's Easy Money or Jason Jett. And the rest of the names, I think, are pretty much.
Sounds like a good gimmick.
What, Jason Boyles?
Yeah.
I know it does. Yeah, okay. I don't know about that. Let me quickly go. The poll for the weekend was on SmackDown. 6% thought the show was excellent, 20% good, 29% average, 14% bad, 31% awful, which is a very strange number because I didn't think I would ever call it awful. In fact, I even thought it was average to good. I mean, the first match was excellent, so second match was good, very good too. Of course, we got the Backlash poll up. A thumbs up, B thumbs down, C thumbs in the middle, and D didn't see the show.
I don't know if it's just because I put the feedback up really early last night, like at 9 o'clock, or if just a ton of people saw the show, but we got an unbelievable amount of feedback for this pay-per-view.
Unbelievable amount the first night. I haven't counted it up. I've been tabulating it all day. It seems to me that it's above average. It's nothing like WrestleMania, though. But yeah, first night we got a lot of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
It was like an hour after the show. We didn't, because like an hour in, I was going, there's really not a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we got like 3. I think I got like 3 in the first hour. And then the flood started. And I woke up this morning, there was like a million more.
Yeah, then the next 3 hours there was tons. Let's see, Jerry Lynn won the light heavyweight title from Crash Holly on Heat, it was all right. Lita and Molly Holly was not all right. And what match are we leaving out here? Actually, we've covered every match. Well, Shane and the Big Show. Shane fell did an elbow. You know what was bad about that on the replay? When we watched the replay, yeah, he missed, and they kept showing it. The other one was, of course, the main event. Hunter and Triple H are now the tag team champions, and yes, Triple H is the second guy, except for Shawn Michaels, to hold the European, the Intercontinental, the WWF, and the tag team titles, because that was the belt he had never held before, surprising as that sounds. And Hunter
and he got the pinfall.
He pinned Kane.
And he was the guy holding up the belts as the show went off the air with Steve Austin slinking away in the background.
Well.
It's quite a performance.
Well, he'll probably do the job to Kane.
Actually, we were talking about on last week. It would make more sense for Austin to do the job for Undertaker.
Yeah. No, you're right. That would make the most sense on the
finish. So make it off with another one.
But for that,
the one thing is, my friend Craig is the world's biggest Shawn Michaels fan, and when he heard Jim Ross say the name Shawn Michaels last night, he almost had a heart attack right there on the floor. They mentioned Shawn Michaels was the first guy to be the Grand Slam champion, and Hunter had a chance to be the second man tonight.
They, what was I going to say? They also mentioned Rob Van Dam on the show, and Jim Ross had a meeting last Wednesday with Rob Van Dam, and then on the Ross report, he was pretty high. I mean, he was talking an awful lot about that, and I could see Rob Van Dam going into WCW very easily, and they've kind of targeted now June 13th as a start date, so hopefully we'll get the city. There is no official anything on that, and that is dependent upon TNN approving of the show, which they have not done yet, and that's one of the reasons why there hasn't been any more specifics on this. The other big story today, this has been all over the media, was a study. Actually, it was a presentation done Saturday. The story first broke, I think it was in the Friday or Saturday, actually maybe in yesterday's, but it was in the Winston-Salem Journal, and then it was carried on AP, and it's been everywhere. In North Carolina, they did this study of high school students about the effects of watching wrestling on television, and I actually talked to, in fact, we may have Professor Durant on, Robert Durant on later this week on the show to talk more about it. Now, he's not a wrestling fan. He just did the study, and but he did give me a lot of the data this afternoon. I got a story that'll be in this week's Observer on it. And the one thing is that you know, like sometimes a well-done study will show data, that like inconsistent, because the sample's not large enough. But the one thing about this is that the numbers were very consistent in that. Just as an example, like the key thing that, which for whatever reason, the one that everyone is talking about is the increase in violence on dates among people who are wrestling fans as compared to not wrestling fans. And especially more on women on guys rather than guys on girls. I want to make that clear, because and there's a very significant difference.
From women on guys on dates?
Yes, it's much higher among women wrestling fans than among guy wrestling fans, and the increase over the norm. Although guys who watch wrestling are more apt to start a physical fight with a girl on a date than non-wrestling fans, and it's a pretty significant statistical difference. Among women, it's far more of a statistical difference. And for whatever reason, I don't know. But it actually, he did broke it down into, what they did was they surveyed several thousand kids, and wrestling was not the crux of the survey. It was a survey about drug use, violence, things like that. And but they included wrestling in the survey. They did not include other sports, like effects of whatever. The survey was done, there were two surveys done and then compared. And one was done in, I believe, late 1999, and the other would have been done in May of 2000. So there's two different surveys to make sure there were no aberrations. And there weren't, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. To make sure that, one didn't show something and the other one, then they do a similar survey and it shows something different just to show that, well, maybe it's a fluke. So, I mean, the methodology used was very good, and they categorized the wrestling fans based on, or people, as far as the wrestling aspect of the survey. It starts with 0. How many times have you watched pro wrestling on television in the last 2 weeks? And it's 0, 1, up through 9 or more. And with every viewing, the violence increases. Now, this does not mean that watching wrestling necessarily leads to more violence on dates, and that's the one category, because there's other categories where it also increased with each viewing of wrestling. Not just that. Drug use was an increase, but not really significant. Fighting, as far as not even on dates, but just regular fighting actually increased more than fighting on dates. And I don't know why the dates, other than, that was the one that the media jumped on, but that was actually the third most significant increase. The number one was just fighting in general. Number two was fighting, where somebody ended up needing medical attention. Number three was fighting on dates. As far as where the wrestling fans differed the most greatly from the non-wrestling fans, statistical average of the students. But each viewing, meant more and everything like that. And they surveyed how many times, as I said, you watched over a 2-week period during those years. And when we figure teenager watching in 99, there was still some WCW. By May of 2000, it's probably pretty predominant WWF if you look at what the demographics of teenagers. And this is, they surveyed people from grades 9 to 12 in the, I think it's in the Winston-Salem area. So that was what that thing was. That's basically what that survey was. Any comments on that or any questions? Oh, the one thing I guess I should say is the question when this comes out, and this is the key one, is are people who are naturally violent people more apt to be wrestling fans?
More likely to watch wrestling.
More likely to watch wrestling, in which case wrestling doesn't necessarily affect what they did as much as it's just like those type of people are more likely to be wrestling fans. And or are people that watch wrestling, because of their watching wrestling, more apt to become violent than non-wrestling fans. And, Durant, when I asked him about that, he thought that it's a little bit of both. It's not one or the other, that there's probably elements of both. So anyway, that was...
Well, if you look at the Gallup poll, it showed some trends right there as to who actually watches wrestling. So I wouldn't say that, it's just people that watch wrestling tend to be more violent, but I think that's probably a lot of it.
Some of it, yeah. And the interesting thing, 65% of the guys, and I think let me get the numbers right. 65% of the guys at that time in high school had watched wrestling over the previous 2 weeks. No, 62%. I'm going to get the numbers right. 62% of the guys, 35% of the women had watched it once. As far as watching it 6 or more times, to me, if you're watching it 6 times in 2 weeks, you're a pretty significant wrestling fan. It's 25% of the guys and 9% of the women. So, anyway, that's the thing. And basically, if you've watched it, the number, if you watched it 4 or more times, it basically doubles the rate of fights that you got into. So that's just generally speaking what that is. And if you watch it 6 times or 9 times, it increases it even more than double. So that's basically the deal. Over a group that's over non-wrestling fans. So that's what that survey actually
We should ask
said.
people who listen to this show to email or call in and let us know how many fights they've got in recently. Just out of curiosity. Seriously, I've never been in a fight in my life, and I've been watching wrestling a long time.
Yeah, but this is starting fights. Now the other interesting thing is that the number of people who had fights started on them, whether they were wrestling fans or not wrestling fans, it had zero statistical difference. So that throws out, what's interesting about that, where a lot of people wouldn't really think about, is it throws out your peer group as part of a thing because, you could say, well, maybe wrestling fans hang out with a rougher peer group in general, and that's why they're going to be getting into more fights. But in fact, that's not the case. The group of people that wrestling fans hang around with have basically the same percentage of fights. They're, basically fights started on them or vandalism on them, because that's among the things that were surveyed, was, how many times has, your school locker been vandalized, or has something been stolen from your thing, or has somebody started a fight with you? And whether you watch wrestling or not, there's zero statistical differentiation in those categories of what someone does to you. So anyway.
It's starting the fight.
Right, it's starting the fight. Exactly. Real quick before we head to the emails, have you heard anything on tonight's Raw show?
Nothing.
Okay, if anyone's got that, just send it in. Oh, you've already sent it to us. Okay, so we'll get that right after this break. We'll have a preview of the Raw show. Let me get to some emails. Let's see. It's from John, who goes, is it my imagination or am I being paranoid about Triple H hitting the pedigree on Kane and Kane not kicking out of the finish, but instead Triple H tagging Austin and then kicking out of the finish? Probably not. What can I say? This is from Rich, who goes, yeah. For the last year, I've been watching WWF do a WCW impersonation. I can't say that for a year. Maybe not, and really in many ways it's not doing it at all. There's those signs that we're all scared of, but then they're there. For most of the year, I've heard how Vince is a genius and what happened to WCW will never happen to WWF, although he did allow HBK to almost run him into the ground in the mid-'90s. I will never, ever blame that on HBK. That him being run into the ground with so many different factors, and don't think Shawn Michaels was a major one, maybe a minor one. I don't know.
He caused some problems, but as far as the major problems in the early 90s, that had nothing to do with Michaels.
Yeah.
He probably helped. Overall problems, he was a small guy that could work when they needed that.
Yeah. You know what it was? That's exactly what it was. Yeah. I mean, the problems that he caused had nothing to do with their big problems. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I've been thinking, although the Click, I mean, even the problems caused by the Click, you know, and some of those manipulations.
In the grand scheme of things, they were nothing.
That's right. In the big problems, they were nothing. That's right. I've been thinking lately where the company's gone wrong, and to me it comes down to one angle, the love triangle. You know, that's not the reason that they're going bad, but it's a great example of the big picture, in that they've, you know, it's so much of that booking on the fly and starting something that they have no idea of how they're going to get out of, and that's true. Two of the three principles.
You know, the whole reason the Click ran so wild was because, or a lot of it was, Vince was afraid of losing these guys, right?
Yep.
Because he didn't have the mindset he has now that anybody is indispensable or whatever. And the reason he was worried about losing those guys was because of the problems that had happened in the early 90s that had hurt his business. Those problems had never happened. The Click wouldn't run wild, and, you know.
Yeah, because he would have had all those muscle-bound guys on top, and Kevin Nash. Mm-hmm. So Kevin Nash would have been in a Click with muscle-bound guys instead of good workers. And he probably still would have had the problems in the, you know, if WCW made his comeback.
But if Vince didn't have to worry about losing anybody, you know, if he felt like he did today, which is I can lose anybody that doesn't even matter, these guys would never have had the kind of power that they had.
True, but he didn't lose people because of his problems. He lost people because he thought that they were washed up and got rid of them, like in Hogan's case, and in Savage's case when he phased him out of active wrestling.
But he was concerned about losing people because business was bad.
He was concerned about losing people because he'd been burned by losing people that he thought he could lose.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because he'd lost, he was burned by the fact that he'd lost, that Hogan, who he thought was done, was doing business elsewhere. Savage, who he thought had no life left, was doing business elsewhere. Piper, who he thought was done. So that, you know, although actually I think Piper actually came later. But that's why, because of that, and then, you know, because with Hall and Nash, you know, actually, you know what? That's not even true either, because the real big business when
Hogan and everyone didn't start, well...
They didn't really do business to hurt him until Hall and Nash really left.
Hogan made money during that period.
What?
But not the rest of the guys. They hadn't come on yet.
Yeah, no, you're right. So he was just... I don't know why he was so concerned. Why was he so concerned about losing people? Because he couldn't have been that... If he was that concerned about losing people, he'd never let Hall and Nash go. You know, I mean, and it wouldn't have taken that much. It was only $750 that got him. It's not like it was a ridiculous offer. $750, guys were making $750 in those days. You know, so obviously he wasn't that.
96 though, right?
Yeah.
That was a money-losing year.
Oh yeah. He was losing money, but still $750 was big money, but it wasn't, you know, like ridiculous money like Vince portrays it to be for a top guy. I mean, Nash probably made close to that.
He probably looked at Nash. He probably had no idea what Nash was going to do for WCW. He probably looked at him as this tall guy that he put the belt on, and for a whole year this dude did horrible business. And it's like, what do I need this guy for, really? I'm losing money. I don't need to keep this guy here. He cost me money over the last year. Doesn't matter if he leaves. What's he going to do over there? Be Oz again?
Yeah. Anyway, two of the three principles. We're going back to Hunter, Kurt Angle, and Stephanie. Two of the three principles didn't want to look bad, so they took the easy way out. Nobody's going to give up their spot at the top, and once this Undertaker-Kane, Austin-Triple H feud blows over, where do they go? Austin-Triple H, where do you think? Rock versus Austin. Yeah, well, Rock versus Austin.
And then Rock will come back, and it'll be those three again for another 6 months.
Yeah. Let's see. Posting things on the WWF website about people criticizing the booking is so WCW. Yeah, I think we said that the other day.
Did you read that?
What? I did read the.
I sent you?
I read like the first half of it, and then I was just sort of like laughing because of how
talking about Rikishi made it to being a main eventer and that sort of thing.
Well, not only that, but like they were going like the same people who criticize Hunter are the ones who like were clamoring for him to get a bigger push, and it's
they
like
giving him 4 stars in matches.
But it's like the whole thing is stupid.
You can't do one or the other. Like you have to do one or the other.
But the whole thing,
criticize him and give him negative stars, or praise him and give him 4 stars. There's no in between.
But I mean, the whole thing is it's like saying that there's this like collective mind thought, and it's like, of all the different people, everyone's got a different opinion, and quite frankly, and I will admit to this mistake, whatever it was, that August of '99, when they were going to give the belt to Hunter for the first time at that SummerSlam, which they ended up doing the day after to swerve people, but because Austin didn't want to do it clean, but when I was going to say, I thought that they were pushing Hunter to a position. I thought that Hunter was very, very good at the position he was in, and I thought that if they made him the world champion, I thought that he didn't have it to be world champion. I was wrong, because he did. And the guy who got him over to that level was Foley, which was months later. But that's just saying, I mean, I made a mistake on that one for sure, because he was really turned into a tremendous champion. But that's not to say that these other things, because he's been a tremendous champion, that, Hulk Hogan in WCW was a phenomenal draw. He was the key in turning that company around, along with other things. He wasn't the only key, but still, you look at those buy rates with him and without him, and the guy made that company millions and millions of dollars, and he was worth that ridiculous salary he got for the first couple of years, and then at the end, it bit him in the ass, and it wasn't only because his work rate sucked, although that didn't help. It was because he wouldn't let other guys get over, and that's the thing that we keep seeing. And,
yeah, I mean, you look at the work rate in the matches where he made millions. It was still horrible. It didn't have anything to do with it.
Yep.
The oldness thing, like old guys, blah, blah, it doesn't matter. Those guys were so old and they were making tons of money.
That's because it was fresh matchups. And when they stopped being fresh matchups, that was it. And they didn't get new guys over.
Another thing that really worried me was an email I got the other day from somebody who was, they read all the Hunter feedback on the website. And their email just finished with the line, it was something like, quit complaining and just enjoy it. And I thought back, and I remember during the dying days
That's what the WCW people used to say.
I got so many of those emails from people saying, quit complaining about it and just enjoy it.
And we were saying things to try to keep them from going out of business, because you and I in '98, when they were making $50 million, saw the signs. And I will say I didn't expect them to go out of business, but I knew they'd be losing money in a hurry. And I knew people were going to stop going to the shows, and you know what happened. This is from John McAdam, who goes, great show with Billy Graham. I tried to call in, but no luck. It was the best guest you've ever had. That's pretty big praise. I've always thought the WF should have turned Graham after his run of rematches with Backlund, but I never thought about the possibility of turning him babyface and continuing him with a champion. It would have been great and sold a ton of tickets. It's funny, because that's the flip side of what's going on now, is that in the days in the 70s and stuff, when Billy Graham was given the championship, he was told, basically, you're going to hold it for like 10 months and then lose. I mean, like, Vince McMahon Sr. used to book this stuff out a year in advance. And it was like, even though Billy Graham sold out the Garden in
Graham had like the month he was going to lose the belt.
What?
Graham was talking about he's talking about, Vince McMahon, he told me this particular month you're going to lose the belt. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, like that would happen now.
He told him a year ahead, because he told him a couple of months before he won the belt, you're going to get the belt at this time, and you're going to hold it for 10 months, and then you're going to lose it at this time. And it was all planned out, and Bob Backlund was going to win it. That was all set up. Now, Graham had turned into a tremendous drawing card as a heel champion, but the bottom line is this was the plan, and that's what they were going. And, Graham, and I've known Graham for years and years, and we've never spoken about the idea of a babyface turn. And when I, hear that and think about that and go back to 78 and how hot he was, the guy would have been, with the exception of Bruno probably, he would have been the hot, he had far more charisma than Backlund. Obviously, he was not the athlete Backlund was, but, he just, and I guess he was very bitter and kind of dropped out of the scene because they didn't do the turn. And he was a guy who the people wanted to cheer. I mean, he was one of those few heels in that era that, was getting 40% of the cheers anyway. Anyway, let's see. Let me continue this. Many people forget that Backlund was not a successful draw during the first part of his reign. From mid-78 through 1980, most of his Boston Garden shows were headlined by Bruno. It went this far. Peter Maivia turned on Backlund in 78. We got 3 Bruno versus Maivia matches, all with a net surrounding the ring to protect the wrestlers from bottle-throwing fans. And he also said the Saint in 1984 in Florida was Dave Sierra. So I had forgotten about him.
Wasn't Val Kilmer? Or wait, who was it that played that?
It's from Johnny Siebold, who goes, I got Hooker on your advice. That's Lou Thesz's autobiography. Man, that was a great book. Maybe not the best well-written or laid out, but the subject was excellent. Finally, I know why you miss wrestling. Now, this is very strange. Does a double cross happen anymore? Do folks go out there and shoot? I say no. We're fed the pablum that the WWF wants us to eat. I think the fact that there's no double crosses and shoots in pro wrestling is not a bad thing. I don't don't miss them.
Kind of screws things up unless you're Vince McMahon, in which case it leads to a
No. Well, yeah, the one thing. But guys shooting on each other certainly is not in Vince's best interest.
No.
So anyway, no, I mean I don't miss that aspect.
Maybe it is though. I mean, look at how many guys in the past have done something. Or, I don't know if shoot's the best word, but double cross their opponent in the ring, just pummeled them and became huge. Ricky Dozan.
Ricky Dozan, sure. Let's see. While listening to your program about Johnny Valentine and Billy Graham, I started reminiscing about the stories these guys told during their matches. Today's wrestling appears to be all about shock value and high spots. Wrestling fans come to expect it and don't realize just what the workers are putting their body through. I heard some fans complaining about the Angle-Benoit match at WrestleMania. That was a great match. I only hope that wrestling allows more matches to go like that so younger fans can see the art. The problem is that when you do that like last night, the audience isn't ready for it. Let's see.
I think you can make them ready for it, but it's
you
an
gotta
uphill
train.
battle. It's not something you do with one angle on SmackDown and hope that you get all these finishers over for a match that's coming up on a pay-per-view in a couple of weeks.
Let's see. This is, let's see, from Mark, who says, some friends of mine, this is a bad one. I'm already going to cringe. Some friends of mine were discussing the ratings on Monday nights and were wondering if it's possible that the lower Raw ratings may be due in whole or part to people not watching TNN because they have a preconceived notion that TNN is a less than desirable channel to watch. Forget that one.
Maybe the media is telling them not to watch it.
By the way, all of a sudden NBC did a 5.9 on the overnights on Saturday with that Bond movie. Here's one. This is actually one I wanted to get to because actually I've gotten a lot of stuff on this. Why is Takayama versus Fujita the Pride main event? A Japanese reporter was on Eddie Goldman's show and said fans in Japan don't want to see that fight. It's embarrassing that it's for the IWGP title. Actually, it's not been announced for the IWGP title, although it may be. They didn't like the Yasuda fight either, and I think Japanese fans are getting tired of Inoki's pro wrestling booking on the Pride show. Fujita versus Takayama will not draw as much as a Coleman-Fujita fight. Yeah, but there's a lot less risk. I think, actually, and I'm not even sure of that. I'm not sure if Fujita versus Takayama would draw Coleman and Fujita. It's different. It's tough to say, but the bottom line is that Fujita against Coleman, with Fujita as world champion, is a huge risk. Fujita against Takayama is not that risk. Or Ken Shamrock versus Coleman. No. Ken Shamrock and Coleman, two Americans, that doesn't mean as much as Fujita and Takayama. Not in Japan, no way. It's time for Pride to separate themselves from pro wrestling.
Especially after Shamrock's last fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's time for Pride to separate themselves from pro wrestling. They have surpassed pro wrestling. Pride is simply a platform Inoki uses to revive the careers of Yasuda, Takayama, and even Fujita.
Kashin.
What? Yeah. He really is going to revive that one too, right? It sounds like the Japanese don't even want to see it anymore. It seems that everyone's tired of pro wrestling on Pride shows. Okay, fans have seen how their favorite wrestlers will do in a shoot, and besides Fujita, who's a freak, all the wrestlers have put on bad fights. Sakuraba? Anyway, Pride is bigger than pro wrestling. They don't need pro wrestlers on their show to draw. They just need the Gracie Sakuraba. Sakuraba's a pro wrestler. Ken Shamrock's a pro wrestler. Mark Coleman has never drawn on his own yet in Pride. The Gracies have drawn against pro wrestlers. Fans don't want to see pro wrestlers embarrass themselves. Actually, I don't like to see that either. Or the fight world with their shoot fights. The bottom line is that Pride draws with wrestling fans, and if you look at every big Pride show that's drawn a big crowd, it has always involved a pro wrestler in the main event, whether it was Takada, Sakuraba, or what was the other one? Or Naoya Ogawa. And the biggest TV rating they did last year was Naoya Ogawa against Satake, which was a worked match, but because it was a pro wrestler against a K1 guy, and that's what drew the money, the TV rating, and the money live, because they had to sell it for the Halloween show, was the idea of pro wrestling versus K1 on a neutral ground in a supposed real fight. And the people who have, there's a difference between your fighting ability and your marquee value, and like Takada, who's not a good fighter, sells tickets, and if it was not for Takada, Pride would have never gotten off the ground, and you have to understand that. And Pride has yet to do a show that's done a Monster House without a pro wrestler in the main event. That's the reality, and to protect the pro wrestlers, they sometimes do worked fights. I don't like the idea that Pride does worked fights, but I understand that the business of selling shoot fights and the business of pro wrestling is a very, very tough business to keep going. Shooting is even tougher than pro wrestling to keep going, and there's some things that you have to do. I don't want to say have to do, because you maybe not have to, but there's some things that are done to keep that business going, and it happens in boxing as well. But if you think that, like, the Inoki stuff is negative for Pride, I totally disagree. You got to understand where Inoki fits into that culture and everything. At that show, not that this is the big thing, but, at that show, and they edited off the pay-per-view here, for whatever, because the people who were, in this country, you kind of have to
wouldn't understand what the hell was going on.
They wouldn't understand what's going on. But Inoki did get the biggest, I watched the tape from Japan. Inoki got the biggest pop of anyone on the show, and Inoki brought out Fujita and Hashimoto and all those guys, to come out on a Pride show, or Kendo Kashin. The fans were totally into those angles. So anyway, let's see. But it's all about selling. It's all about selling tickets. Let's see. Because of the UPN situation, could SmackDown move to CBS on Thursday night and get better ratings? Yeah, right. They'll cancel Survivor and put SmackDown on. But yeah, it would. Of course, it would do better ratings. Let's see. Get to a couple of these emails. Let's see. A lot on that thing. When you were on the Law last night, they said there was no clock in the building for the Benoit Angle match. There was a clock on the big screen and also on the scoreboard above the ring. The crowd just didn't get into the match. All the new fans who didn't understand about the match were at the merchandise stand getting food. Okay. After seeing Backlash, I'm wondering if the main event for Judgment Day is still scheduled to be Austin against Undertaker. It doesn't look that way, because if they want to do that, they shouldn't Undertaker and Kane have won. They still may.
Before then.
Yeah, they can win.
I guess they've already done the lineup for the Insurrection. I was thinking they could do Insurrection, just do a rematch, have Undertaker pin Austin, win the belts back, sets up the singles matches for the next pay-per-view.
Well, they'll probably do it on a Raw or SmackDown if they're going to do that. Let's see. With Jerry Lynn getting the light heavyweight belt on Heat, do fans of the junior heavyweight division have a prayer the WWF may take the belt seriously again? Probably not. They'd certainly have the talent for at least a decent division if they just give up the 20 minutes of the How Does Hunter Get Over this week show. So the guys would have a decent amount of time to get themselves over to a good mid-card level. Let's see. Just interested in what you thought of the Goldberg book. Pretty shallow, kind of disappointing. I liked the non-wrestling stuff a lot more than the wrestling stuff. The football stuff was good. The wrestling stuff I was very disappointed in. He goes, I don't think he expressed a great attitude toward wrestling, kind of like he was ashamed to do it when he started. I never got that he was ashamed to do it. But I do get that it was nothing he ever had a desire to do, and he didn't love doing it.
It wasn't like his life's dream or goal to do it.
It definitely wasn't. It was just something that he kind of fell into, and he was kind of amused in a sense that he got over, but I got no sense that, I got the sense that he was ashamed of certain things that are in wrestling, but, I am too. But that doesn't mean I'm ashamed of being a wrestling fan. In describing his entry into WCW, it seemed like he had a pretty easy run, and yet complaining how it was a pain in the ass. He had it easy, and he had it hard. Actually getting to the top, he had it easier than anyone probably almost in history. And once he got there, he had it real hard because he didn't understand what they were doing to him, but he could see that, what was happening. And since he didn't understand the business, it was probably tougher because he couldn't figure out what was wrong. He goes, I think he should talk to some of the independent guys who are still trying to make it. What do you think? Let's see. I was listening to your show on the archives, and you asked about Bronco Lubitsch and Mark Lawrence. Mark is a minister at a church in Watauga, Texas. Yeah, I think we actually talked about that. Okay, let me see. What else? Okay. Let's see. I was writing if you think it's possible to put a WCW Classics plug for getting Turner South added to DirecTV. You can send a DirecTV. It goes, I have a UFC question. With WCW, how's this going? Let's see. With WCW being bought by WWF and ECW going under, I heard this may hurt pay-per-view companies since WCW and ECW are losing. They're losing between 14 and 16 pay-per-views for this year and a lot of revenue. Can this potentially help the UFC get back on major pay-per-view providers? Logically, that would make sense. That doesn't necessarily mean it will happen.
In the real world, no.
I think it'll help. I think that it'll help when these companies start looking at their bottom line and realize it won't help right away. But what's going to happen is they're going to go in there and because boxing, there haven't been a lot of big boxing matches on pay-per-view. They're going to look and go, because with the exception of WWF, nobody's doing big business on pay-per-view, and they're going to go, we're making less on pay-per-view than we expected. What can we do to make up for that? And then they'll go, well, gosh, UFC used to do business. I think like in a year or 6 to 9 months from now, yes, but right away, I don't think that they're thinking as much about it as like, we all are when we say, my God, there's no more ECW, there's no more WCW. there's room for more pay-per-view companies, and UFC and Pride are, right there on DirecTV already, but not on the major cables. So I think that down the road, I think it makes it's a difference, but I don't think that the pay-per-view companies have figured out yet that their revenue is going to be down, because I don't think that they really know. In demand knows, but I don't think the big companies themselves really are concerned, or not concerned, but really have the knowledge that WCW and ECW aren't running pay-per-views. Let's see. I know UFC alone can't fill the void, but pay-per-view providers should realize it's better than nothing also. They can show Pride, Rings. Rings isn't going to be on pay-per-view in this country. It would never work. And King of the Cage. The faces. You need marquee names. Even UFC and Pride, it's going to be tough unless they have TV. This idea that you can put something on pay-per-view live and make money on it without television, somebody's better smarten up about that, because, look at like WoW and some of these pro wrestling guys, heroes of wrestling. You just don't make money on these shows. It's just a money pit.
By the way, did you find out how much the WoW pay-per-view was?
I think it was 8,500 buys.
How much? If anybody knows how much the show was, let us know.
Yeah, what was the price of the WoW pay?
$19.95 or $24 or whatever it was.
So let's see. This is from Scott Keith. He goes, I don't have anything new and exciting to add to the feedback on the pay-per-view. I thought it was marginally good. Show that was incredibly depressing if you stop to think about the booking and where it's going. However, what was with the Duchess of Queensberry? The person, not the match. I know the point of the match and it didn't work, but they're so clueless with Jericho now that they felt that having this bad actress out there getting abused by him would get him over. Remember when Tom Zink was on the show and talked about how having a sleeper for a finish makes you look like a royal sucker? Doesn't Jericho look like that sucker? Every time he puts the walls of Jericho on someone who's interfering, like Stephanie or the Duchess, the entire crowd knows the finish coming a mile away. And it's happened a million times with Triple H, with Angle, and now with Regal. I also like to point out that the audience is far smarter than WWE gives them credit for, because once a DQ was reversed in that match last night, they didn't pop for any near falls because everyone knew Jericho was going to lose. That's a really bad sign, because it shows the audience is ahead of the bookers in much the same way that a good novelist needs to be ahead of the reader, but in this case, they are not. I'm worried by the time the WWF finishes telling all of us about how stupid we are for criticizing the product, we're going to be all the fans they have left, just like between 93 and 95. Okay, well, let's start with Matt in West Virginia. Matt, you're first up.
Hello?
Hey, Matt, what's up?
Oh, I'm not Matt. I'm John from Delaware.
Well, golly.
Oh.
Hey, John, what's happening?
Pretty good. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, listen, I got a question for you about pro wrestling as far as the perception as far as the public has. I know obviously a lot of the networks don't want to even touch wrestling now. That's why Paul Heyman's company went down. That's why WCW is no longer on television. And I was curious what your opinion was as far as what, if someone is to promote wrestling, how they would actually describe wrestling as a different entity to what Vince McMahon is promoting. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is, if I'm a wrestling promoter and if I go to a television producer and I say, look, I want to give you a great wrestling program, but I want to give you something completely different from what Vince is producing, how would I go about describing it as far as different?
I just don't think it would work.
Really?
Because I think they're just gonna hear the word wrestling and they're gonna go, yeah, okay, your family entertainment. That's what Vince claims.
Right. So basically,
it's going to be. The thing is, what's tough is that they're all branded with the same brush, and I think a lot of TV people, they just hear these things like Lionel Tate murder, and it just buzzes them badly right now about pro wrestling. And then this survey comes out, and then the survey last week, it's like every week we're hit with one, and it reinforces this idea that whatever ratings wrestling draws, it's like kind of like not the desirable audience, and that's like a real killer.
Plus you got to convince advertisers too.
Right.
It's not just the networks.
Yeah, you got to. Exactly, and if you do a different product, the problem is that to make it on a big scale, you have to do a different product from Vince. But I know, because I talked to the indie guys here, you are trapped by what Vince puts on television, because the people that go to your matches, they are expecting a product like Vince McMahon's wrestling, because that is the only wrestling they see on TV now, and that is the wrestling that they know. And if you do something different on a local level with no television, they're just going to go in there. And some people can and
no
have
stars,
right?
And no stars, and a lot of the people are going to go, well, how come we didn't get the the broken tables, and how come they're just doing you know what I mean? Unless it's what's glorified on the television has to be is what the fans are expecting. Brian's out there most weekends doing indie wrestling, and
right.
You're to an extent you're trapped by what's hot on WWF, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then my next question then would be, how would you promote something like Mat Rats then?
Well, Mat Rats is so totally
That's the
different.
problem they're having right now.
Oh, okay.
How do you promote it?
Because other than what's on your show, I'd never heard of Mat Rats other than the fact that what I read off your newsletter. So that's why I was a little curious about Mat Rats, because I'm thinking, well, if it's something different than what is out there, how would you go about promoting it other than saying, well, this is something that's different from wrestling? Because there again is that word.
That is guaranteed how they're going to try to sell it, is that this is a clean, sanitized version of wrestling, and we're going for the youth market that, of course, that Vince has too, but we're doing something totally different than WWF, and we're not going to have, that type of stuff.
But then you still have the same problem where the surveys just came out saying, kids that watch wrestling are more violent, or they get in more fights, or they start more fights, or whatever.
Right.
And no matter what you say, as soon as they hear that word wrestling, they're going to look back at that survey. They're going to look at Bob Costas and the footage that they aired on Raw, Vince and Trish, and it's just going to be all downhill from there.
Yeah, speaking about that interview, I remember watching the interview and thinking Vince didn't do wrestling any favors with that little tirade he threw out there. I mean, I remember watching that. And
on Costas?
No, McMahon actually. Because I remember I got in an argument with a friend of mine saying that, well, Costas kept interrupting him, Costas kept jumping in, and I said, well, the thing is, if you're
that Vince interrupted Costas far more than Costas interrupted Vince in that interview.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and the funny thing is, during my argument is, well, if you're trying to promote wrestling in a different light, you completely failed by basically you became what it is you're not trying to be, which is your own character. And that's basically the point I was trying to get across, was the fact that, it's one thing to say, well, this is not what we are, this is not what we are, but when all of a sudden you start becoming that character, you just become a different animal, and at the same time, once again, all the stigmatisms that go with wrestling, well, this is what's wrong with wrestling, you just flash it out there in the open.
That's what was in the XFL part of the interview when Vince goes, the Vince McMahon that you see on TV is different than the Vince McMahon in real life. And then they go to the WWE
show, he's the same guy.
He morphed into him.
Right.
Became the Vince McMahon on TV.
Which I thought was funny.
I think now in hindsight, I think most people will recognize that like a lot of people were very defensive of Vince at the beginning, but I think most people recognize that whether Vince's points were valid or not, some were, some weren't, that his performance did him no favors in the real world, because, Bob Costas was pretty well respected, and it was kind of like, it's like that very successful millionaire, maybe multi-millionaire, maybe billionaire guy who's out there that's just an asshole. It's like, I think how people who are not wrestling fans took that interview, and if you're a big sponsor or anything like that, and you're watching that thing, you're kind of going like, oh God, this is the guy that we're in bed with.
We're in business with this guy, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a positive for the company. If he'd said all the same words and he was really calm and everything like that, it was very similar actually to when Mushnick and Vince were on Mike and the Mad Dog, whatever, it was like a week later. If you actually analyze word for word what Mushnick said and what Vince said, Mushnick didn't come off.
Transcript.
Yeah, because when I was writing the thing in the Observer about like what was said, and I was looking at it point by point, it's like, you know what, Mushnick really, based on what he said, he was right a hell of a lot more than Vince, right. But he came across so wired and everything like that like, unless you were really a huge Mushnick supporter, you would think that Mushnick did really, really bad.
And he gave the WWF's portrayal of Phil Mushnick.
That's right. He made a mistake by not just being calm and going, these are my points.
Right.
And Vince kind of totally understood. Vince just sat back and didn't have to say a word, and he won the argument by just sitting back and not saying anything, because Mushnick was doing damage to himself by just how, his presentation, just like Vince did, yeah.
Right. So I'm kind of curious. I've only heard the Mushnick interview through interviews. I'm a little hazy on this. What exactly is Phil Mushnick's deal with Vince McMahon and wrestling? Because it just seems like he's always on a tirade with wrestling. So, can somebody explain it to me a little bit? Because I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, what happened was, it goes back to the Zahorian trial.
Okay. And
he wrote an article after the Zahorian trial, because basically going like, the Zahorian trial pretty much proved that, or showed a lot of evidence that a lot of the key guys, including Hulk Hogan, were taking steroids, and then the WWF came out afterwards and said, this trial has nothing to do with us. And he basically wrote the story going, this trial has everything to do with you. And then it opened up the floodgates, and a lot of people, started going to Mushnick. And there were a lot of stories, some of which were true and some of which were not true. But the key one was Tom Cole's story that Mushnick got behind. And it was the same thing. There was a secret settlement by Vince, and really sordid thing. But Mushnick was on the right side. I mean, without any question, if you, know the background of that story, and he wrote a lot about the steroids, which, as the court case showed, what he wrote was essentially true. But what happened was, then Vince McMahon sued Mushnick, and that's when it really got out of hand, and unfortunately then it became a vendetta, and whoever sides facts, this is one thing, believe me, I've learned. If you are in what the people believe is a vendetta, you can have all the facts on your side, and people will not take you seriously. So if you are a reporter, any reporter, never get involved in vendetta, and when someone picks a fight with you, as much fun as it is to like come back and rip them and make a fool out of them, the minute you start doing that more than once, people are going to go, aha, he's in a vendetta with him, and it doesn't matter whose points are right. People are just going to dismiss all your points, so you got to stay away from it, and he made that mistake. So anyway, that's the story on that.
Ah, okay, got it. Gosh, there was another question I was going to ask you. I was kind of curious. Been watching wrestling since I was 15, so there's a name that I was always wondering whatever happened to, and whatever happened to Al Perez and Gary Hart?
Gary Hart is living in Texas, and I don't know what he's up to. He sometimes books some independent stuff down there. Mm-hmm. Al Perez is, I think, living in Florida, and he dropped out of sight, and, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what happened, what happened to him. People in Florida, I don't know what it is, because he could have stuck around doing indie work and stuff, but he just dropped out.
So he just basically gave up the sport?
Yeah, because I haven't heard his name in years, and he's not that old now. I mean, I think Al Perez would be about 42 now, so,
right.
There's plenty of guys a whole lot older than that still running around in indies.
Okay. What about Wildcat Wendell Cooley?
God, I don't know what happened to Wendell Cooley. Probably just got out of the business.
Just got out of the business?
Yeah,
Okay.
He was Al Perez's partner in Mid-South.
Yep.
Way back when, 15 so years ago.
That was my first exposure to Robert Fuller.
Robert Fuller. He's
back when Jerry Jarrett's old territory.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Robert Fuller. I think he might have been booking then, even.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I think he may have been Robert Fuller. I know he always booked. He booked Alabama a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I used to read all the stuff in the old PWI magazines, which I probably still have somewhere around here. So that's why I remember the names, and I remember I remember watching Tennessee Valley Wrestling a couple years ago.
Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
Not Smoky Mountain. It was back when it was called Mid Southern. It was
Mid Southern.
Yeah, it was back when Jerry Lawler.
Okay, Jerry Lawler. Okay, Mid Southern. Mid Southern was a name that the Bill After magazines made up that actually never existed in the wrestling world.
Oh, was that what happened?
Yeah, they never actually had a promotion called Mid Southern.
After Mags made up a story.
What it was. Okay, Bill Watts' territory, before it became UWF, was always Mid-South Wrestling.
Right.
And then the Lawler stuff was always out of the Mid-South Coliseum, and they were, but their title was called Southern. But Florida also had a Southern title, so what Apter would do to differentiate between the Southern Heavyweight title that was in Florida and the Southern Heavyweight title that was in Memphis is he would call the Southern Heavyweight title in Memphis the Mid-Southern title, and then he would call the promotion Mid-Southern, even though nobody in that promotion ever once called it Mid-Southern. So that was the Mid-Southern story.
See, that's what happens when I grew up in kayfabe.
All right.
Okay,
Anything else?
No, it's been,
Okay.
Thanks a lot, and love the show, guys.
This is what is announced so far for tonight's Raw show. This is from Joe Morrison, who goes, the bald guy who hangs around with Triple H defends his title against Kane. Actually, it's, of course, Steve Austin. Chyna versus Trish for the women's title. Oh, good God. Oh, good God. Matt Hardy against Edge for the European. Sounds good. X-Pac versus Spike, which might be all right. And that's all that's announced so far. It goes, can you believe that Raven and Rhino had the best match with all the talent on that roster? Believe it. They may very well have. It was pretty close with a couple of them, but I wouldn't argue that at all. In fact, I think it may have been the one I picked. Let's see. I don't understand what people mean when they expect Big Show to be the next Andre the Giant. In what sense? Wrestling ability or charisma?
Oh, who said that?
Well, originally that's what everyone expected him to be. That's why he's paid all that money. Oh, no, yeah. No, I mean, Andre came along at a different time. The wrestlers were a lot smaller then than they are today. And they built him up, and it was just a different era. Andre could travel from territory to territory and not get stale, and he could, always win, and he was a big attraction. Now, if Andre were to come along now, I don't know that he would be any big deal. In fact, he probably wouldn't, as Big Show shows. But
a lot of it, too, was Andre did so much touring, and so you got to see this guy in person. I mean, he really was in person a huge man compared to the fans. And you just see Big Show on TV with all these other big guys, and you don't understand how big he is. It's totally different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, what's funny is when I watch back old tapes of Andre, and I see him in the ring, and I remember everything, and it's like, height-wise, I just remember watching this tape of Andre, not all that long ago, and I'm going like, you know what? I mean, Kevin Nash is like way taller than this guy. Actually, he probably really isn't way taller, but like an inch taller. But just the way, if you look at where the ropes are and everything like that, and I'm going like, and this guy was like Andre the Giant, and he really didn't do a hell of a lot in the ring, but it's just, like I said, timing is everything. Do you think the lack of heat for the submission match hurt Benoit or Angle's chances at being a main eventer? Not long term because it was one match, but it absolutely did not help. I will say that. I say this because there was no interest in the audience to see them perform. I was watching a show on the Sunshine Network today. It was showing classic wrestling from a Carolina organization called North American Wrestling Association. During a six-man tag, one of the teams had Sam Houston and two other guys. One of the guys looked like Ken Shamrock, but he wrestled by a different name. That was Vince Torelli, and it is Ken Shamrock's original wrestling name.
Vince Torelli.
Yeah. Vince Torelli. Isn't there a guy with that name in Oregon now?
It's my friend Vince. His name was Vince Verhey, and we used to always call him Vince Torelli because that was Shamrock's name. And one day I was looking through a ring around the Northwest, and Mike Rogers was talking about one of those wrestlers' reunions, and there was this dude named Shoulders. And I said, there just haven't been enough shoulders in this business lately. So I called him Shoulders Torelli, and the name stuck.
So that's the Torelli, okay.
That is the story.
Oh. Do you know what the timetable is for Rikishi's return? He's cleared. He may be on TV tonight. Don't know. Can Sabu speak English? Yes, perfectly. Let's see, Dave. When Billy Graham came back to challenge Backlund, he sold after sold in New York and other cities, but in Philadelphia people didn't buy it. I remember when Graham first came back, they were announcing the matches for the next show at the Spectrum. The announcer said, next month Bob Backlund defends the title against. The fans started yelling for Billy Graham, and then he said, Iron Mike Sharp. I thought there was going to be a riot. Now that I think about it, it's possible the WF didn't think the match would sell in Philadelphia due to the Gorilla Monsoon story, but obviously there was interest in the match. Well, it's a match that's being built up on television. Gorilla Monsoon went on a local radio station.
Has that newspaper ever admitted that, in fact, Billy Graham is still alive?
That paper, no, they never admitted it, but they did report on his matches after he came back. But Monsoon never did a retraction.
No retraction or anything?
No, and Billy called him up. That's a famous story. Billy called him up and told him with his own voice, you got to print a retraction. He said no.
That's nice. Maybe it's going to be like, how the Pope forgives people after about 300 years?
Yeah.
Maybe they can do that one of these days with that newspaper, like 100 years from now.
One thing that I just remembered, did you when they were talking about the ringing of the bell and everything like that?
Mm-hmm.
I was at a show where they rang the bell in memory of Billy Graham in San Jose, and there was something in, the Monsoon story is the one that everyone remembers, but the San Francisco Chronicle did a big story on this, because I remember this, I was like I think it was in high school or college at the time, and the Chronicle had a column, and I don't remember who the columnist was, but they quoted they were talking about steroids in sports, and they quoted John Swensky, who was the San Jose wrestling promoter, and at that time I don't even think he was even promoting anymore, because I think the territory was already dead. And he was going like, we had this wrestler who was in here, Billy Graham. He was bigger than Schwarzenegger, which in fact he was. And, he took all that stuff and now he's dead. And, he died of cancer. And I had forgotten about reading that until talking to Billy on Friday, and all of a sudden, wow. Okay, anyway, let's finish this. After a caller berated, there's plenty of interest. Okay, it goes, there was plenty of interest in the match. Gorilla Monsoon went on a local radio talk show soon after, and a caller berated the WF for giving main events, specifically Graham and Backlund, to the New York people, while the Philadelphia fans got screwed. I think Monsoon actually had the nerve to remind the caller that Philadelphia got a great main event, like Atlas and Ventura in a cage match, that New York didn't get. Oh, God. I think they brought Graham and Backlund to Philadelphia later in the year, but by then the fans knew that Graham had already lost in other cities and the interest waned, plus the summer was a horrible time to run in Philadelphia. Come on. I bet you that Bruno sold out in the summer when he had a good opponent, too. Let's see. How about Jericho and Regal in a rematch under Duchess of Queensberry rules with pinfalls and rounds, but this time Jericho knows what's coming. Do you think that the exact Angle Benoit match would have played better in Sumo Hall? Yeah, it would have played better in Sumo Hall. Let's see. This is from someone in England, because he goes, I stayed up till 5 a.m. to watch this, and it sucked so bad. Best match was Rhino and Raven, and the three-way was too short. Hated the submission match. Suddenly they're tapping to cross faces and ankle locks within seconds. Where's the logic on that when on Raw and SmackDown nobody sells and taps for those moves? Actually, I thought
the idea was it's a submission match, so you don't want to be injured in a submission too long. So as soon as you know that you're in it and you can't escape, you just tap. and they release it, and you go on.
Yeah, because you've got to go 30 minutes. I thought Heyman did a real good job of explaining that, actually. Let's see, the ankle lock is the single worst-looking submission in pro wrestling. All I know is I've seen it it works, yeah. And the pro wrestling cross armbar looks stupid. Yeah, but it's real. I mean, I've seen more people tap out to those arm bars than anything but the choke. I would like to have seen more real submissions used as the rear naked choke. Yeah, they didn't do any chokes.
One of those. No one tapped to it.
Yeah, triangle choke. Yeah, nobody understands it. The problem with the triangle choke in pro wrestling is you got your shoulders on the mat and you can get pinned. If you actually do it
last night, though.
No, but I'm saying that's why it's not. You could make although they do it in New Japan Pro Wrestling all the time. Neck crank. Nobody would understand it yet. Then again, they didn't understand half of what they did last night anyway. Guillotine. Well, they do guillotines in Japan. And more pro wrestling submissions such as the STF.
The headlock.
Done that. Dragon Sleeper. Figure 4. Yeah, they didn't do any figure 4s. Why does no one do the figure 4 in WWF? Why do they? I don't know. Because I think they're afraid everyone's going to go, whoo. Let's see. At least Benoit won. Shame on the
They did that with the chops, though.
Yeah, they did. Let's see. How much did you get paid for being in Beyond the Mat? $0. And do you feel Barry portrayed you as an idiot? Absolutely. What? Was I that one sentence saying that I think Mick Foley knows what he's doing? I never thought I was an idiot in that movie. Let's see. Would you recommend the J-Cup 95 and J-Cup 96 for someone starting to get into Japanese wrestling?
Yes.
Yes. And what were your thoughts on J-Cup 2000? Good, but not great. Okay. If Shane would have actually hit the Big Show with the elbow, would there be a good chance he would have messed up his arm? God, let's see, fallen 30 feet. Let's see. It's funny that the best match on last year's Backlash was Dean Malenko against Scotty 2 Hotty, and neither one was on the show this year. Well, Scotty's hurt, and Dean's just not on the show.
Big Show predicted correctly what would happen on the pay-per-view, though, in his conference call, when he said, "I'm not concerned about winning or losing. I'm just concerned about what is going to fall on me or what I'm going to fall from."
Yeah.
He was right.
Was the Duchess David Taylor? I think the
Duchess really was a woman. I was thinking the same thing, too.
I thought the Duchess was a woman, too. I'll have to look back at that tape. Let's see. Let's go to Matt in West Virginia. Matt, what's going on?
Maybe it was a real Duchess of Queensbury.
Yeah.
Are y'all there?
Matt, what's up?
It's good to finally get through. I was just wondering, myself and friend TJ Allen were huge Memphis wrestling fans. I was wondering, what was your favorite Memphis wrestling moment back in the days of USWA?
Oh, God. I don't know. When Bill Dundee and Buddy Landel poured flour all over Lance Russell, or was it Jimmy Hart who poured flour? No, when Jimmy Hart poured flour over Lance Russell before and then Lance Russell fired him right before he went. And then when Bill Dundee and Buddy Landel beat up Jeff Jarrett when Jeff Jarrett was just a referee, and Jerry Lawler got called to come back and save the day, and they did that sellout at the Coliseum for a couple straight weeks with Jerry Lawler and Dutch Mantel against Landel and Dundee. Austin Idol, when Austin Idol and Paul Heyman and Tommy Rich shaved Jerry Lawler's hair, and then the comebacks from that. There's so much. That was a great period.
Definitely. I train at Jimmy Valiant's school now in Shawsville, Virginia, and I was wondering, how about getting Jimmy on as a future guest in the future?
Would it be good?
I think he has a lot to offer.
I mean, if he's got a lot to say, yeah. I mean, I don't know how he would be. I haven't spoken to Jimmy Valiant probably my whole life.
Really? Yeah.
So I don't know.
We train about every Sunday now, and I was just thinking about calling in and telling you, mention that I think he would be very good as a future guest on your show. He has a lot of history to offer, definitely.
Well, he's around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And he's still around.
Yeah, he is. I think he's wanting his last match to be in 2004.
Oh, well, is there a reason why he's picking 2004?
I really have no idea.
Does he keep pushing that date back?
2004 is the first year I've heard of him wanting to leave the business. So
he's on his retirement tour
at Jimmy Valiant School.
What is it now? What do we do?
Yeah. How long have you been training there?
It's just a regular wrestling training school. He gets in and shows us pointers, and he has trainers there that come every week and help us out, and we go through the basics. And some are more advanced than others, but it's a fun environment. I really like it and enjoy going there.
Does he teach you to kiss Dave Brown?
No, we haven't learned that yet, but
that's what I always remember every time he would.
Week.
he would always come into Memphis and he'd do that dance, and they played Boy from New York City, and he would kiss Dave Brown and kiss Lance Russell, and you know, he was a big star in Memphis, though.
Huh?
He was a big star in Memphis.
Yeah. I just recently got a hold of some of the tapes featuring him on there, and I remember Randy Hills always talked about how he would be a big draw at times in Memphis. So.
Yeah.
What did you think about the Andy Kaufman angle?
Well, when it happened,
what were
when it happened? I was in Florida on a vacation, and it was all over the news. And I'm listening to this story, and I was thinking, since it's on the news, that wow, you know, like this actor, you know, I mean, Taxi was one of my favorite TV shows at the time. This actor, I mean, I was figuring like the mentality of wrestlers in that era, that if some actor did that Jerry Lawler would have to hurt him, and that Jerry Lawler actually hurt him, and I thought it was real. And then like a week later, or 2 weeks later, because I was sort of getting into wrestling on an insider basis, which sort of didn't exist, but there was like a newsletter, and then I realized they were building a rematch, and I go, oh, okay, they're building a rematch. That's something totally different.
Yeah.
So you know, and most people in wrestling, you know, because there was no communication in wrestling, and people didn't know what was going on in territories at all. When most people in wrestling heard that story, they thought, you know, it was a real until it, you know, came out that, you know, Andy was going back and doing programs with Lawler. So, I mean, I remember watching it. I thought Andy Kaufman, you know, was at the beginning. I thought he was just the most obnoxious guy in the whole world on that TV show, and he was the only guy who could make Jimmy Hart be a babyface, because they did the Jimmy Hart Andy Kaufman feud where Andy was supposed to go babyface, and the fans all cheered for Jimmy. So, and Jimmy was one of the best heel managers in the business. That tells you how much people hated Andy. They couldn't turn him, because when they had Andy team with Lawler at one point even, and then Andy turned on Lawler again. But Andy, you know, if you ever watch. And Lawler will tell you this himself. If you ever watch the tapes of all the Andy Kaufman stuff, he came back so many times that the people did get tired of it. I mean, if you watch the beginning stuff, they had some really big crowds. But by the end, I mean, they weren't drawing any fans with that thing because, you know, you could just do so much.
You only see a match so many times.
Well, especially with Andy Kaufman.
The majority of the people I've talked to about the film really didn't realize it was a work until the movie came out about Andy Kaufman.
Really?
Yeah. So, you know.
But remember, I'm sure you're right.
The book that came out right before the movie was like, it was billed as this big expose telling the truth about it. Like, you know, nobody was supposed to have known what it was before the book came out.
But God, they did programs and turns and all that. But you know the one thing, but remember when Jim Carrey and Lawler did that thing when they were filming the movie?
Yes.
And
yes.
like, I mean, I remember it was like Newsweek or something like that. Comes out, and I mean, they're talking about how Lawler had injured this guy before, and I'm thinking, like, Jesus Christ.
Everyone... Newsweek, it was like all those big magazines.
And it had already came out that it was a work between Kaufman and Lawler, hadn't it?
Right, and they were reporting that, you know, Lawler did the same thing. They're trying to make kind of like Lawler this, like, you know, bad guy that, like, you know, picks on actors. You know, not realizing it was common knowledge by then that, you know, the Andy Kaufman thing was a work. In fact, one of those magazines, and I don't remember, I think it was Newsweek, I wrote a letter to them because I was so embarrassed that Newsweek, you know, which, you know, you're supposed to trust, would say that, like, you know, this is the second time Jerry Lawler has done this thing, and I go, and I wrote them a letter. It was a very nice letter, and going like, look,
you idiots.
What they did before, what they did before was pro wrestling, and you know, I never even got a letter back, and that disappointed me so much because, you know, if someone writes me a letter and like I'm just dead wrong on something, I don't have any problem. I'll just go, hey, sorry, I was dead wrong, you know, but.
Yeah.
You know, you would think with Newsweek, you know, that they should have that, and they didn't, and I lost respect for Newsweek for that. Even though it's not a big thing.
They never even published your letter?
Oh, no. Of course not. Yeah.
Well, okay, guys, thank you for your time. I love the show, and I'll be listening.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Should have put something in there about Billy Graham while you were at it.
What about Billy Graham?
That he was alive.
Yeah. Do you think a garbage federation could ever be the number one company?
No.
No, unless everybody else was out of business.
Maybe a few years ago, but not now.
Yeah. Do you think anybody is regretting the Austin heel turn? I'll tell you what. In a month from now, the end of May, I'm going to go back and look at some numbers and see how that's going. Right now, we'd be looking forward to Austin against Triple H instead of Austin against Undertaker. What did Jericho do to peeve Triple H? Came in with the same hairstyle. Any update on the site and date of WrestleMania? I think it's April 7th in St. Pete at the Tropicana Dome, I think, whatever it's called. Tropicana Field.
Is anything confirmed?
It's not confirmed, no. That's just the lead site. No, it's not confirmed.
Okay.
Who do you think will win King of the Ring? I don't even know who's in it yet. Have you read Scott Keith's book? No. I am waiting for Scott Keith's book, but it has not arrived here. This is from Mark, who says, I'm 19, I've been a wrestling fan since I'm 4, and I've never been in a fight. I don't think wrestling makes me violent. Now, actually, only, let me look at the percentage here. Of guys. I think it's like 8% of guys who watch wrestling. 8% have been in fights, have started fights with their date. 8% is like a high number, though. But it's only 8%.
Especially with their date.
Yeah, I know. I have not gotten into a fight from watching wrestling since my wife has been watching Days of Our Lives. She's had this uncontrollable urge to stab me in the back. This sounds like studies that conclude marijuana is a gateway drug to cocaine and heroin. Sure, people who wind up doing coke and heroin probably started out with a tamer drug or had access to methods of distribution and thus progressed to their use. But I'm willing to bet if you did a further study, you'd find out that 100% of all drug users start out drinking milk. Does milk make someone a gateway drug user? No, okay. That's a ridiculous thing, though. I bet people fighting on dates also watch Sesame Street as well. Okay, but if you did
I didn't watch Sesame Street.
Okay.
And I never started a fight.
Okay, here's the point. If you did a survey of those people and you surveyed the ones who watched Sesame Street and didn't watch Sesame Street and found out how many of them got into fights while on dates, I will bet you that the number would be almost identical, which was the same thing of the whole deal. What was interesting, it was the people who had fights started on them, whether they were wrestling fans or not, that there was absolutely no difference. So that's taking that, kind of like, that takes your environment out. And the fact that every one of those levels of watching wrestling led to a statistically larger level of being involved in starting of fights was an amazing statistic. I mean, if it was like, what I'm saying? If there's like a correlation of like two things in a row, okay, the odds of that are pretty good. I mean, because you can like flip a coin twice and it can come up heads, but that's, even though it would be 50-50. If you flip the coin 100 times, the odds are it's not going to be 100 heads, right? So if you have like categories and you have like, and basically what I saw today was 18 different categories and they all said the same thing, the odds are that that's not just coincidental. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right? This is someone else. He goes, I'm 28. I've watched wrestling since I was 4 or 5. I've never been in a fight in my life other than play wrestling in the schoolyard in grammar school.
Oh.
Okay. I'm 32. I've been watching wrestling since I was 3. I've been in half a dozen fights in my life, but I didn't start any of them. I haven't been in a real fight since I was 15. My last girlfriend hated wrestling and used to beat the hell out of me. I didn't fight back.
Whoa.
I think wrestling is the result of people's violence. All decisions are your own. Nothing forces you to make decisions. Some peaceful people watch wrestling and never become violent. Of course they do. Most, I mean,
92%.
If 8% of guys that watch wrestling started fights with their dates, that means 92% don't. So obviously, most don't. Anyway. I've been a wrestling fan my whole life. I don't know an exact year I became a fan. I just know I have been one for a long time. I've never been in a fight. I think the study proves nothing because you said it was only done in one city. Actually, it was done in one county. Plus, I think it depends on the person at hand, what they will do when they watch wrestling. Of course it depends on the person at hand. If it was 100%, it would say something. It's 8%. It says 1 out of 12. It makes a difference. Okay? So that's a statistical variation. Let's go. I'm going to go to one more. I've been reading recently that Bret Hart is still plagued with the symptoms of the concussion he suffered almost 2 years ago. Is this true? Yes, it is still true. Do you think Rob Van Dam will kill Goldberg's heat if he's signed to appear on WCW's first show? I think it will have nothing to do with it whatsoever, one way or the other. Are the WF writers part of the Writers Guild Association? Does the WF know how many people watch the pay-per-view in Spanish? They may know. I don't know the answer as far as Spanish, and as far as the Writers Guild Association, as far as I know, they're not. Let's see. One more on this thing. About the Wake Forest study, one, other possibilities that wrestling fans are more likely to admit or claim they started fights. If they actually did start the fights is another matter completely. Possibility on that one. Brian, the WOW pay-per-view was 1995. Okay, so that would mean that it would be $9 divided, so that would mean probably just under 12,000 orders. Okay?
Oh, there you go. That's no TV.
So, they had TV.
Oh, they did have TV.
They had TV all over the country.
No good TV.
No good TV. what does the WWF have against Chris Daniels? He's probably the top independent guy. He's a great wrestler. He knows how to work a crowd, but he doesn't get a break.
You know they still are airing WoW up here? Repeats?
So that means that they're just not paying for that. They're just showing the reruns.
Yeah.
Yeah. He goes, the WWF signed the Wall and not Chris Daniels. Yes, it's like, tall guys will always get the benefit of the doubt. That's right. This is from someone who goes, I've been in 9 fights and have won 6. Well, congratulations.
Which did you start? The survey hopefully did not ask how many fights the wrestling fans won. But I would guarantee the answer would be 100%. How about how many people were involved in the fight that you lost?
9.
0 to 3, 4 to 10, 11 and up.
Speaking of which, I am really tired of all the Shawn Michaels bashing. You know, I gotta say this. I'm gonna say this right now. Okay. There's certain realities, and we all live in this world, and you should live in the real world and not the fantasy world. And
not like
Shawn
Shane
Michaels.
McMahon.
Okay. Like Shane McMahon and Vince and Stephanie.
Vince lives in reality.
Okay. Shawn Michaels is one of the most talented wrestlers that any of us have ever seen. There's no question about it. By saying the fact that Shawn Michaels showed up in no condition to work a couple of weeks ago, or that Shawn caused trouble backstage, or that Shawn didn't drop titles in the ring, which are factual things if you look at his record, that does not detract from the fact that Shawn is still one of the greatest workers we ever saw. But you can't deny that Shawn, you know what I'm saying? It's like people think because Shawn is such a great worker, or you know, I mean, and actually, you know, Shawn, you know, compared to Hunter's like a better example of this. Hunter, you know, Triple H is a phenomenal worker, one of the top 5 workers in the country and top 10 in the world. That doesn't mean that he doesn't manipulate things backstage, or that Austin doesn't, or that he's the only one who does, but he does. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, a simple question being,
quit ripping apart the XFL, talking about the 1.5, the 1.9, like we're making the numbers up.
Yeah. Anyway, I grew up in Texas and I watched World Class. I grew to like it better than WWF and thought wrestling was real. Ooh, I watched it. Now I'm 30 years old. I live in Oklahoma, and I agree with your views on Kevin Von Erich. I just love the bad guys that fought the Von Erichs and caught a lot of grief for liking the bad guys. But the best match during that time frame was Ric Flair and Kerry in Texas Stadium. That was the most memorable match. It was far from the best match. But, that's the legendary match for sure. When Kerry won the title, I have 2 questions. Why did Kerry drop the title in Japan? That was just how it was booked. They had a schedule worked out. Kerry was gonna defend it for 2 weeks. They were both gonna go to Japan at the same time. Rick was gonna get it back. Come back for, there was a big show at the Meadowlands that Rick was gonna wrestle Ricky Steamboat, I think it was. In fact, I know it was. And Japan was just a place. Yokosuka, Japan was where it was picked. There's no specific reason. Second is, why did Luger drop the title after such a great match on Nitro? Luger dropped. Oh, is that,
remember when he beat Hogan? That was a good match.
With Hogan? That's how Hogan booked it, that's all. That's the reason.
Shockingly good match.
Yeah. And then they came back with that Road Wild match, and it was terrible, right?
Yep.
The rematch?
Where, I think Big Show turned heel and joined the NWO, which made no sense.
Let's go to Scott. Scott, you're next up.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing really good.
I just want to know, have you guys noticed how good Albert's been looking lately? I mean, maybe it's because he's in it with Just Credible and X-Pac, but he looks huge.
Oh, he is.
Well, he is huge. And
all these guys are huge.
And I mean, it looks like, for his size, he's a decent worker, you know. And then
he's a decent worker. He's very agile. The only problem I got is that WWF mentality that, to me, if you bring in, they really love big guys. And most often, smaller guys are better and more entertaining than big guys, but big guys serve their purpose when they look big.
Oh,
with
wait,
Albert,
he's bald, never mind.
What?
Oh, wait, he's bald, never mind.
Yeah, but I mean, like, but like Albert and Test are 2 guys that are really, really huge guys that nobody thinks of as huge guys because they got Undertaker and Kane and these other guys that we always talk about. And so they can't get over as monsters unless, it's okay. They can when they're next to Justin Credible and X-Pac and Spike Dudley, obviously, but it's a weird thing. So, but anyway, no, Albert's a real good, he's a real good athlete for a big guy. He moves well and, he's not clumsy or anything. And,
I mean, and he gets into it as far as, facials and stuff like that. He always makes a lot of noise. And, I mean, maybe
he does make a lot of noise.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not, the best noise.
And now he wears a shirt, so that's good too.
Yeah. And then also I wanted to talk about the pay-per-view. And I just thought, overall as a pay-per-view is pretty bad. But as far as, I had really low expectations for this one. And, I thought the hardcore match and the European match, were 2, the maybe not. I'd give them like, you know, three-star matches, you know, as far as what they were worth, you know.
I think the expectation level has a lot to do with it because I don't think a lot of people expected much out of the show, so it really couldn't disappoint that much.
Mm-hmm.
But if this had had like the hype of a WrestleMania or something like that, and it had been the same exact show that it was, I think people would be very angry right now.
You know,
Oh yeah, if this was a WrestleMania like this, absolutely. Because everyone,
Not even WrestleMania, but just hyped up that way.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? About 15 out of the 17 WrestleManias have been pretty bad, yet it's still hyped, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty weird.
This year helped.
People just look at it as like, oh, the big event of the year. They never look back and say, you know what, these pay-per-views have normally been bad. And I mean, normally.
Well, I think there've been more than there've probably been there've been more than 5 or 6 of them that have been good. I
I
think
thought 8 was good. The one with Flair and Savage. I thought that one was pretty good.
that was good. The 10 was good. 17 was good.
The one, the Iron Man match. I mean, that match was good, but there was only 6 matches. So I mean, it's like.
Well,
Yeah.
the one thing is, Vince McMahon has his idea.
Three.
About
I think 3. I think 3 was really good.
I just liked Savage and Steamboat, and I liked was it Honky Tonk and Jake. Or I thought
I think there was a 6-man there that was pretty good. Jake.
The thing is, if, like the majority of Vince's fans that buy these shows go with his mentality that the main event is what sells the show and everything like that. I mean, whether all the WrestleManias were great top to bottom or not, I mean, except for Hunter, of all people, being the first heel to win the main event last year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been the babyface finally gets a big win on the show and sends people home happy. So.
Yeah. And then, this weekend I went to 2 different indie shows, and one of them in particular I wanted to talk about is that it was like an NAWA show or something. It was when Bret Hart was there doing an autograph signing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just watching the show, and it had to be about, maybe 100 to 200 people, right? It was in a high school gym, and I'm just watching this, and, it's a mixture of guys who, they're doing it, for the practice, they're doing it to wrestle, the indie guys. Then there's guys like Sabu and, who else was there? Sabu and other ECW guys who it's like, Sabu is sitting there, and he's trying to make money off, people taking pictures with him and stuff, and he just looks so washed up, And it's sad 'cause, I mean, he's not been around for that long, But he
has. Actually, yes. Because Sabu's 37 years old, 38 years old.
But, I mean, they're billing him as, like, this huge, like, icon in wrestling, and he's, far from that. Maybe he's an icon in ECW, but, I mean, standing next to Bret Hart, what's Sabu,
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And then I'm looking at this show, and, more than 60, 70% of these guys are, I want to say talentless, Like, there was an opening match where, the guys, they didn't look good, they looked really out of shape, It's almost like, just local
How many
guys.
indie shows have you gone to?
Oh, I've been to many.
Okay. I was just going to say that's a lot of indie shows.
Yeah, but I mean, this one I thought was, extremely bad, with the exception of Reckless Youth, who I think is awesome. But I mean, and by the way, what's the rib on him? Why isn't he? Because I know he was under developmental with WWE.
He was under developmental, and whatever it was, obviously they didn't like, and I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe that they felt he was small or what. I mean, Regal liked him.
WCW caliber to me. I mean, he's up there with the guys like Chris Daniels and Low Key as far as top independent talent.
It's just luck. I mean, I'm sure if he was under WCW contract at the time, like Kid Romeo or somebody like that, or look at they signed Kiwi, and there were guys. It's just if you were under contract at that moment, well, who knows? Who knows? Because they didn't. The fact is, Modest and Daniels had low end contracts, and they didn't pick them up. So,
yeah, who
knows? Who knows who went through making those decisions? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's Ross was the main guy. So.
Yeah,
That's Ross.
Page? I'm hearing Page might be one of the guys to go over there now.
Oh yeah, well I'm sure he wants to, and it's just a question of working the thing out with Time Warner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what about Rob Van Dam? I mean, it seems very weird that he mentioned him on pay-per-view.
Well, he met with him on Ross met with him on Wednesday, and they had a long meeting, and I think there's a real good shot Van Dam will end up in the WCW side.
I think it's pretty much financial at this point.
But the thing with Paul Heyman and naming guys is, it's almost as if, he doesn't really care, You listen to him, and he'll say something, but Jim Ross will just be dead silent about it, won't even, comment on it. So, there's nothing really to think of. If Jim Ross had said something, or if Jim Ross had mentioned Rob Van Dam, I would have looked more into it. But, because it was Paul Heyman, he's always doing that.
Yeah. No, but I think that the coincidence of Ross meeting with him on Wednesday and Heyman mentioning him on the pay-per-view, I think that was not coincidence.
No coincidence.
Yeah, what do you guys think about doing, maybe I know this is not going to happen, A, because, you know, he's a smaller guy, and B, because he has blonde hair and a goatee. But Jerry Lynn doing some sort of, you know, the push they gave Lance Storm when he won, you know, 3 of the lower-end titles? Well, not the U.S. title, but the hardcore and the cruiserweight belt, and he renamed him whatever. You think maybe Jerry Lynn could do that with, you know, European title and the light heavyweight title, and maybe IC, well, not IC at the time, but I mean hardcore or something like that?
They could if they wanted to. If someone got behind it. I mean, there's no reason not to or to do it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just depends on the writers. And, you know, it's not the main event program, so I don't think that there's going to be, like, you know, any of the main guys really objecting to it or anything like that. You know, and I think Vince, I don't think, I'm not saying he doesn't care, but, you know, Vince's mind is more on the main title. So if a writer comes up with that and the other guys and the other writers agree with it, they could do it. And if not, you know, they won't.
It just seemed like that was the way they were going. I mean, as far as yesterday, they just walking in there winning a belt, you know?
Well, I think they just wanted to get him off on the right foot. I thought it was a smart idea to do it. You know, at least people think it's better for him to win in his first TV than get squashed, obviously. So there's no perception of him that he's a loser going in.
No damage to Crash Holly.
Yeah, one more thing on the pay-per-views. Did you guys notice that the bump that Shane took? I mean, obviously he missed him and everything, but what he landed on, don't you think that was probably the best-looking stunt fall that we've seen in wrestling in a long time, as far as, you know, gimmicking the fall? I mean, it's like the one.
Well, it didn't look like a gymnastics pit.
It did. I mean, I thought it looked like, you know, like you felt it would. I mean, of course, there was, you know, was a cushion under it or something. But I mean, as far as, you know, the Sting one, which I thought, I mean, from a wide look standpoint, the Sting one was spectacular. But then, of course, when you saw he fell into, you know, strategically placed, you know, mats that were probably
Sting never fell into anything.
You know, the stunt guy.
Yeah.
Sting number 2.
You know, Canyons was pretty good off the cage too. Didn't like
Canyons
was bouncing like on a trampoline.
I think Canyons off the cage was better looking.
Like Canyons off the cage was good, except it was so weird that, you know, all of a sudden they bust out this ramp, and then all of a sudden they use it. A couple weeks later, it's gone. You know.
Yeah. It's from Jared, who says, in regards to the Gallup poll, which indicated wrestling fans have less formal education, isn't that result intrinsic due to the age of the wrestling fan base? Actually, when I first read that survey, that's what I thought too, but it's not, because what they did was, it wasn't the percentage, these polls are so confusing, but it wasn't the percentage of wrestling fans that have college degrees as compared to the percentage of auto racing fans that have college degrees. It was the percentage. It was the method of that poll was they polled people that had college degrees, okay? Of those, 6% said they liked wrestling, which was by far the lowest of all the other 11 sports. So that is it was fairly done. I mean, again, you know, because they go like, if you know, you're so, like, if you were doing that, because my first thing was, well, geez, you know, there's a lot of wrestling fans that are 18 to 24, more than those other sports, so therefore the percentage of wrestling fans that have degrees should be lower than these other sports because it skews lower, but that was taken, the way they did the polling, that was taken out of it. So, he goes, I dislike when people attempt to use statistical analysis of survey data to prove anything because it can be easily interpreted to prove whatever point you want. You can, believe me, you can make numbers prove almost anything, but if you have fair numbers done fairly and you ignore them, I think that's even that's almost as bad, if not worse, because there's like a denial of what is reality. And unfortunately, you know, these surveys, what?
The WCW survey.
The WCW survey. The Gallup survey, let me tell you something, that Gallup survey, whether you like it or not, that was a real survey. I mean, this other one, you know, when we're studying causes and effects on this one, the Wake Forest one, there is the thing of, if people are naturally rowdier, they may more likely be wrestling fans, and therefore the influence of wrestling on causing people to be rowdy, there may be none at all. You can interpret that, or you can interpret it differently. But as far as people who are college graduates, what's their favorite sport, and it's not wrestling, that cannot be interpreted in any other way than how it came out. I mean, that's, you know. Let's see. I read on the Ross report Jim Ross having a bunch of meetings with WCW talent and potential talent. They have a writing team in place. No, they do not. What's the timetable for them to have one? They're working on it. I'd say probably 3 to 4 weeks.
Still getting resumes from hotjobs.com.
Yes, they are, as a matter of fact. They've got a lot of people who've sent in, what do they call it, treatises? Is that what it is? In fact, if you want to be a WF writer, you can send to hotjobs.com.
Yes, please send your booking ideas to hotjobs.com.
Yes. Someone will actually read them, and hopefully, I don't know.
Opposed to observer.com.
Okay. Andrew, you're up next. What's going on?
Pete.
Oh, it's Pete. Well, Pete, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going good.
Why would Shane McMahon do that?
Because he's Shane McMahon.
Once he got out
He's
there,
set
he
himself up to have to do something like this on every show.
You're the heir to $1 billion. Why are you going to risk your life like that?
because you're a McMahon, and it's a way when he owns the company, he can say to the boys when he just goes, I want you to slice your forehead open, and those boys in 20 years will go, you know what? This man,
That's
when I was a child, instead of saying that's barbaric, they're going to go, when I was a child, this man jumped off of a 30-foot platform, what I was watching on TV, so I can't go and say, you do it, buddy. So that's part of the answer.
You got to give it to the McMahons. They may be appalling as human beings, but, man, they do.
No. It's not a family thing, but Shane has guts, and Vince has guts. Stephanie's never done that, and I hope she never does for her own sake. I was scared when she took Hurricane Rana once on a TV match because she came so close to landing on her head, and I'm going like, you don't need this.
They should have
Linda
come out and yell at
Undertaker
him
last night.
They should have Linda come out and yell at him tonight. You know, like his mother yelling at him for.
At Shane, that didn't happen. That didn't happen.
Listen,
I'll tell you what, though, of all the people in that building, I bet you she was the most scared of all. More than any of the fans.
You told her that he was going to do it?
Oh, what? They're going to spring it on her? Hey, we're going to swerve you, Linda, Your only son's going to jump off this platform, and, she knew. I'm sure she was holding her breath.
I like when he crossed himself. That was a nice touch, I thought.
That was probably real. That's what I would have been doing up there.
Did you know? That reminds me. There was a match about 10 years ago in Japan, and they had this cage that was about, I don't know how high it was, maybe 8 or 12 feet. It was really, really high, and Bull Nakano did a leg drop off the top of the cage to win this match. And Bull Nakano's standing on this cage, and she's crossing herself too.
You know, amazing about the WWF that they always feel compelled to lie and exaggerate. This tremendous.
That's not WWF. That's wrestling.
This tremendous, spot, and they lie and say it's 50 feet. Like 35 is not enough.
Hey, can I tell you something? Last night, okay, the number of people in that building last night was like 15,500. Okay, and they announced 17,192, and I'm just thinking, why lie? What's
it's like everyone's got the seating arrangements in their house to find out that they're 200 people below capacity or whatever. 2,000.
No, but it was a real sellout. I mean, it's a real sellout. I mean, it's not like they lied and said they sold out. That they didn't. They just they just exaggerated the number. And I mean, I have no idea why.
That's wrestling. You got to exaggerate everything. Height, weight.
They lie.
Yeah, I mean, the Big Show's not 500 pounds or 7'2" either.
That's right. Why did they make him sound fatter?
Yeah.
Listen, I have a question. How much is Benoit's inability to main event is his fault for not being able to assert himself politically?
Oh, as far as for not being able to assert himself politically, a lot. And also, you're right. Because Chris Benoit is one of those guys who tries to stay out of the political thing, and those guys, historically, are the guys who get shit on in this industry. So, if you want to,
Triple H all you want, but the guy's got to stand up for himself. I mean, because, to coin a phrase,
right.
It is all about the game and how you play it. I mean,
100%. That's why the guys who you notice to do the least number of jobs or key jobs, I mean, I'm not going for these fake jobs like the Kevin Nash, Rey Mysterio job or something, but those guys are the guys who really are in the ears of the booker and all that. They're not the best wrestlers. Ric Flair is probably the best wrestler of our era, and he did a million jobs because Ric Flair always wanted to get along and have everyone like him. These other guys, like Triple H or Kevin Nash, they've got their own interest in mind, and they don't say yes a lot. I remember Nash, when Nash was Booker, and he would always book Ric Flair to look bad, and his theory is like, well, he's not going to say no. When you're in school and you want to get, because this is Kevin Nashism, when you're in school and you want to get laid, you don't date the girl who says no. So I don't know what that means, but that's what he said.
Because I'm wondering, at what point does Benoit realize this? I mean, it's not like he's a rookie. I mean, he's been in the business
around
15
forever.
years. I mean, when is he going to realize it?
I think he has
points to make. I mean, he can. If he points out to Vince that he can be like a Ric Flair guy who can actually be in the main event and put other guys over, whereas Triple H is never going to do that.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that, he's not a 24-hour, you got to remember he's married, he's got a kid. He's not a 24-hour-a-day guy. He's some guy who comes in, does his job real, real well, and then goes home. Whereas Triple H, I mean, it's 24 hours a day, and that's the difference. And it's not a knock on Triple H.
I'm feeling Benoit more than him. I mean,
Yeah, but as far as like when Benoit going to change, I don't think he's going to change. I think that after 15 years, you kind of establish what your life is. And it's just a question of a booker who decides they're going to go with him and all that. And they've got people in there. Heyman's a big fan of Benoit's. So it could happen, but as far as him going in there, and the only time I ever remember Benoit asserting himself, and I was shocked when he did it, was that deal with Sullivan when he walked out of the company. And I was shocked. Mm-hmm. I was shocked he did it, but he sure did. Especially when they gave him the belt.
Well, the one time they gave him the belt, he left the company.
Yeah. There it was.
Let me ask you, and I got to be careful how I phrase this, but what is the effect of people who get around the $29.95?
A lot, and no one knows statistically because there've never been surveys on it, but I've heard anywhere from people think that it's over 20% of the audience. So it's millions and millions and what?
I would think it would be more than that.
You may very well be right. It's millions and it's millions and I know it's not hard. Millions and millions of people.
Oh, you do, Dave. Are you admitting that?
No, not me. I'm just saying I know it's
here from this conversation.
I know. No, I'm just saying I know it isn't because I know plenty of people who have those boxes. I know it's not hard. So it's millions and millions of dollars, no doubt about it. I'm sure that the WWF and certainly
the smaller.
Do they have
boxes for digital cable yet? Yeah, I have some friends that used to have box, and then when they got digital cable, they couldn't use it anymore.
They have them for digital. They have them for DirecTV. You can get it for anything you want.
Huh, how about that?
Not that I know anything about that.
Of course.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, thanks.
This is from Harry, who says, notice the parallels between Kurt Angle last night and Bret Hart in the Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12. Wrestler 1 has a submission hold locked in. There's no way out for Wrestler 2. The bell rings. Wrestler 1 releases the hold and begins to leave, thinking it's draw. But wouldn't you know it, the match must continue. A flustered Wrestler 1 then loses in sudden death almost immediately. No idea what it all means, but it can't be. Yeah, it was a minute 30 in one and a minute 31 in the other. You know what's funny was when he went back, I go, this is going exactly a minute 30. I was only off by a second.
Exactly what I thought, too.
Did ya? The segment, now this one's really funny. The segment where they showed the live event calendar left me wondering why the hell did they do that? They plugged a sold out pay-per-view that we were actually watching. Remember, don't forget, like this night in Chicago, it also, and then they plugged a sold out Raw. Why would you plug something that's sold out? Are they hurting for advanced ticket sales? Actually, in some markets they are, but I don't know why. But I don't know why they plugged the pay-per-view. Let's see. I loved and hated Shane's dive for all the reasons you can imagine. The most disturbing thing was when Shane crossed himself before the leap. I sat there thinking, this guy is going to die, except his parents met at church. I fully expect Test to get that push until such a yeah. I expect Test to get a push until such a time Hunter realized that Test is a big guy with long blonde hair and has the potential to be main event over. Did you know that Test, when he was brought in, this true story, was told to darken his hair a little bit? He really was.
Huh.
And I think I could be wrong, but I think it may have been Hunter who told him that too. But he was told.
I remember that Test was on the cusp when he was about to marry Stephanie. Hunter stole his girl from him and then beat him in a match. It was all over for young Test.
Well, now he's going to go to WCW and be a superstar and beat, Booker T or something, and it'll be all over for WCW now. Let's go to Tom in Texas. Tom, what's going on?
Hi. I had a couple questions for you.
Sure.
On the Beyond the Mat, you mentioned the wrestler Dennis Stamp.
Yes.
And you mentioned you said he was sort of like the policeman of like some sort of like the wrestling academy where like he would be.
No, he was for the Los Angeles promotion in the mid '70s. Dennis Stamp was their resident policeman. Yeah.
So I mean, and you said he effectively to weed out the good from the bad, he would like break somebody's ankle or something.
No, actually, the deal was when guys would come in the old days and go, hey, I want to be wrestlers, come to the wrestling office, hey, I'm a tough guy, I lift weights, I want to be wrestlers. Most of the offices, would have a guy in the promotion who was the policeman, who was a real tough guy who knew submissions or knew amateur or something, and they would put him in the ring with that guy, and then that guy would eat him up and make him look really bad, and then the guy would have, quote, respect for wrestling, and he would leave. And in some cases, like in the Florida promotion, with Matsuda, I mean, and people like that, Bob Roop, Danny Hodge. I mean, they would hurt people. I mean, and the whole thing was those guys would limp around with a broken ankle, and people would see him at a bar and go, "What happened to you?" And it's like, "Oh, I wanted to be a wrestler, and here Matsuda did this to me." Dennis Stamp was not a
that's because it reminded me. Hogan had the exact same story, and I just.
And that's a true story. Yeah, it was Hiro Matsuda. He went in there and he said, "I want to be a wrestler." And Hiro Matsuda sat out on him and broke his ankle. And Hogan was out there with the cast on, and big giant Hulk Hogan was walking around town going like, "I wanted to be a wrestler." And little Hiro wasn't little, but he's littler than Hogan. But Hiro Matsuda did this to me. And then when Hogan came back 8 months later, Matsuda loved him because he was going like, "Wow, this guy's got guts," because he came back for seconds. And that's when they started training him to be a wrestler.
Right. I just didn't know whether this was some kind of tradition in wrestling that.
It's an ugly tradition of old-time wrestling that doesn't exist anymore.
Did he go? Oh, it doesn't.
We still break people's legs up here.
Like power plants or something like that. So okay, and a couple more questions. Did you say how did Rick Rude exactly die? Did he die of some kind of drug?
It was an he had several drugs he had high levels in, and one or two of them fatal levels in. So that's what the autopsy showed. I mean, the thing is that a lot of people think that it may have been GHB that killed him, and GHB doesn't show up in an autopsy. But there were he had high levels of many different drugs in his system when he died.
Right. One final question. I was wondering, since Rock is in the movies and stuff, he's got to be part of some kind of like Screen Actors Guild or anything. Would that have any effect union-wise with his, being part of a union and being a wrestler? Like, would that have any kind of clout in terms of?
No, because Screen Actors Guild doesn't cover wrestling, so he could go and wrestle. But he couldn't. If the Screen Actors Guild were to strike, he would have to strike with them.
Right.
But not strike wrestling.
Just movies.
Yeah.
Okay. And is Scott Hall keeping his nose clean, to your knowledge? Like, he hasn't effed up recently, has he?
He's got very good reviews in Japan. I don't know how good the reviews are in Florida, but good reviews in Japan.
You know what I'm saying? Just like he hasn't like keyed any cars or anything.
No, we haven't heard any negative publicity like that at all. And you know what? And I think, and you know what else? He's back with his wife, believe it or not, too.
Oh, good.
Really, Dana?
Yeah, they're back together.
Yep. And what do you think? Last question. What do you think the chances of that Max Payne movie ever coming out without Vince?
Zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe if Vince buys it.
then we'll never see it.
Splice it all up, and it'll be like a 1-minute movie.
Oh, Alice, any more callers? Should I just go ahead to emails? We're out of time? Oh, my God. All right. Well, we're totally out of time. We will be back talking about Raw tomorrow at 5.